again, this is a very emotional day. We are expecting the attorneys to give.
Yeah, I saw CNN reporting people outside the courthouse pouring baby oil on each other. We are a deeply unserious society, man. It's like, brother, even if like there wasn't enough evidence, let's say, to convict someone beyond reasonable doubt that like they did racketeering or they were basically the head honcho of a criminal enterprise that was like sex trafficking women and setting up these like sex parties and extorting women to participate in them. Okay, he's still on video like beating the out of his girlfriend.
Getting the verdict coming in right now. This is coming in real time, and we have count one here. This is the racketeering charge. We have the count here of not guilty on racketeering. This is coming in real time. We have count two also coming in here, not guilty. That is the sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura. Count three, we have guilty. Count three is guilty for the transportation of Cassie Ventura. That is guilty. Count four, this is the sex trafficking of Jane. That's a pseudonym. Not guilty. Count five, we have guilty. That is 5 counts. We have a mixed verdict here. Again, count one, as it relates to racketeering, not guilty. Count two, as it relates to sex trafficking, not guilty. Count three.
Is this the OJ situation again? No, dude. No, this is not the OJ situation. This is a dramatically different situation than the OJ one. First of all, there is no like prevailing narrative in the environment. There is nothing like no, this is not what? No.
Guilty. Count four, not guilty. Count five, guilty. Now, we should bring up here, Misty, all of these counts have a range of different sentences, a range of different evidentiary burdens, a range of different outcomes we could have had here. But it is a mixed verdict, if you will.
It's a mixed verdict, but it is a stunning victory for the defense. The Mann Act, these charges, these were the easiest for prosecutors to prove, the lowest hanging fruit, merely required showing that state lines were crossed for the purpose to engage in prostitution. We saw a lot of evidence on these charges, did not have that element, Laura, of force, fraud, or coercion. And this carries the lightest sentence of these charges. It is a maximum of 10 years. And keep in mind, when you're talking about maximums aren't the rule. They are the exception. They're for the most exceptional and severe cases. So now you're talking about a sentence that's potentially in the lower range with time served because he's been behind bars. The fact that these sex trafficking charges, specifically with respect to Cassie Ventura, means that the jury was convinced by the defense, at least with respect to reasonable doubt, that the commercial sex, i.e. the freak-offs, were not connected to some of this violence, that there was not that force, fraud, or coercion element. That is by far, from a penalty perspective, the most serious. It carried a 15-year minimum. So that is a huge distinction. This is the best case scenario, in my view, for the defense. A lot of us opined yesterday that when the jury asked for a readback of Cassie Ventura and Daniel Phillips, one of the escorts' testimony, that read perhaps negatively for the defense. The jury was digging in to see if there was that force, fraud, or coercion. Clearly, it went the other way.
And, it's interesting because the prosecutors had told them you don't have to find force, fraud, or, coercion on every single instance that he did this, right? You only have to find one. It doesn't have to be that this happened every time. But for the racketeering, you really did need to find a pattern of behavior. You needed to find a criminal enterprise that he engaged in with other people, right? When people think of racketeering, they think of the mob. They think of running drugs. They think of running guns. Now,
I mean, they also think of rappers as well, considering that this is what they tried to do to Young Thug too.
Federal prosecutors have used a far more expansive view of racketeering, especially in recent years in SDNY, right? Because they want to bring in all of the worst evidence. They want to stretch back the material decades ago. And so you've talked about how it allows them to tell a full story. Well, it turns out doing that in this case did not fulfill what the prosecutors had hoped, because obviously they have now cleared him. They have acquitted him of that top charge of racketeering. They have acquitted him of 2 other charges of using force and fraud, despite despite having that video, right, Misty? We talked about that video being so damning for him, where you see him on tape pulling Cassie Ventura by the hair. You see him stomping on her. The jury heard evidence that he actually paid money to a security guard to bury that video. Paid him.
Wait, is this Hun pro Diddy? No. Why the would I be pro Diddy, dude? What the hell? Who the even is pro Diddy? Like, I guess maybe the misogyny tourists, they'll probably reach out and be like, oh yeah. But even then, the fact that he's like bisexual kind of cuts off a big chunk of the people that would be like pro Diddy in general. The only person I know who's pro Diddy is the mother president, you know? Like, the manosphere guys, even before we all found out like the extent of the cruelty, the extent of like the insanity, a lot of people immediately were like launching. A lot of people were immediately attacking Diddy because like before we found out more of the very clear disregard for human safety, they were already like, oh, he's gay. Like that was. It felt like that was almost seen as like a bigger crime than the actual harm that he was doing to like women and men, right? And it's just like DJ Academics maybe DJ Academics is pro Diddy. I can see that. How do you explain he got almost scot-free? I think the prosecutors up. I guess I don't know. Maybe they overextended with the RICO stuff. I mean, he clearly has a lot of money and had a fantastic defense team. You know, I'm surprised. I'm just as surprised as you are. But then again, I wasn't paying super close attention, so maybe I might have missed something. You know what I mean?
And yet it wasn't enough.
It was not enough. So when it comes to the sex trafficking, yesterday, those questions that the jury asked for the readback with respect to the testimony aligned perfectly to what prosecutors in their closing argument said were three very obvious instances of sex trafficking, because they did not have to find that it was the hundreds of times that Cassie Ventura had testified that she engaged in these freak-offs. So prosecutors pointed to these three, that testimony.
He's on video dragging a woman back to the hotel room. Yeah, except the problem with stuff like that is number one, the criminal justice system very clearly doesn't successfully prosecute people often, people that harm women often, even if it's on camera. Number two, okay, I think that there is a difference in the charges potentially, as opposed to like simple domestic abuse or domestic violence. Like that's a much easier thing. That's a much easier thing to get across, especially because it happened on camera. But this is not about that. This is a larger. This is a case that is much broader than simply what he was caught doing on camera. They couldn't prove a connection between the on-tape violence and the sex trafficking.
It aligned exactly to that, what the jury wanted to hear. So here's where the defense clearly broke that chain, because what needed to happen was that the jury believes that the commercial sex acts, so those freak-offs, that Cassie Ventura engaged in them because of that violence, because of the force that Combs was exerting, because of extortion about releasing these.
Yeah, the prosecution was not, I guess, able to convincingly explain that the extortion and the violence played a formative role. And they literally hit again, this is why I said misogyny plays a role in this. They hit no, she was actually enjoying it and she was actually asking for it defense. It's I guess, a very hard argument to make to begin with. In the simplest terms, that's what it is. They were able to at least convince enough members of the jury that there was reasonable doubt that the victims were involved in this in a way that they were in a way where they were consenting to it, rather than being extorted.
Videos. But what the defense argued was there were lots of other reasons. There was jealousy in the relationship. Yes, there was violence, but it related to these personal romantic relationships that he had with both Cassie and Jane.
As opposed to being part of this masterminding of an enterprise.
And you know what's interesting, Laura? So now we know, we opined about why the jury was not on the same page when it came to RICO. We said, was it because they couldn't agree on a predicate crime, or was it because they just couldn't get there with respect to the idea of this criminal enterprise, which has been very amorphous?
Are we going to see Tory Lanez as defenders? Yes, but the manosphere, I think, is like of two different minds here, because on the one hand, the manosphere loves when like men who get accused of sexual deviancy, sexual assault, sexual harassment get off. They love that, and they will join in on the pylon regardless. But also, a lot of those dudes are homophobic. So Diddy being bisexual puts a little bit of a stopgap on it. Like because they've been using, that's the reason why people have been using like, oh, no Diddy or Diddy freak offs as a way to say like no homo, as a way to point to like queer behavior in general. So while they hate women enough to like kind of use this as a celebration, I think it would give a lot of people pause to fully come on board, especially because like Diddy's reputation has been permanently tarnished as a direct consequence of you know, being out and about openly bisexual.
During the course of this case from
So
prosecutors
who knows,
hasn't really defined what it is or its purpose. And the answer is it's that. It's either they didn't believe there was a conspiracy or the enterprise existed. And I say that because the Mann Act, these two charges.
Like if he was just straight and also a you know, mass or whatever, they would totally offend him, I think. That's it.
Are predicates for RICO. Yeah. So if they believed that there had been a criminal enterprise,
that would have been enough.
This would have satisfied the predicate crimes. So that means
they didn't satisfy.
The text did a lot of heavy lifting. The defense used them to make it seem like she was into it because you can't necessarily read emotions through text. New York Times did an article on them and shows the text here. A jury began deliberation on Monday over the fate of Sean Diddy Combs, who was facing charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. The jury will have access to hundreds, if not thousands of pages of evidence presented during the trial, including a year's worth of text messages that chronicle Combs' relationship with the two women at the center of the case. The trove of texts the jurors have seen provided intimate glimpses into the dynamics of the two tumultuous relationships. The first with Cassandra Ventura, the singer known as Cassie. The second with a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Swipe to read the selection of messages the prosecution and defense have used in court to make their case. The words sent between Sean Diddy Combs and his girlfriends have been cited as crucial evidence by both sides of the case that hinges on whether sex marathons he directed were coercive. When do you want to freak off? Lol. Lol, I'm just going up to change and put my ring in. I just picked it up. I'm always ready to freak off. Lol, lol. You tell me the day you choose. It can be whenever, ? Says Cassie. Diddy says, name the night. Defense referred to this August 5th, 2009 exchange to try and convince jurors that Cassandra Ventura, the singer known as Cassie, was a willing participant in the freak-offs. In 2016, Sean Combs says, call me, the cops are here. You gonna abandon me all alone? Call me, please. Cassie says, I have a premiere Monday for the biggest thing I've ever done in my life. I have a black eye and a fat lip. It was time for me to go. You are sick for thinking it's okay to do what you've done. Please stay far away from me. 2016. Call me, help. I'm about to be arrested, says Diddy. The prosecution pointed to this March 5th, 2016 exchange, which occurred after Ventura was assaulted by Combs in the hallway of a Los Angeles hotel after a freak-off as a part of his effort to manipulate her. The police never arrived at the hotel. Like, he did some demon shit, dude. He really did. He really did do some demon shit. It is kind of wild. It's not just like gross, ew, icky, oh, gay, whatever the people think. Like, he was straightforwardly beating women and making them participate in these like sex parties. Like at some point they might have actually enjoyed the sex party initially. That doesn't change the dynamic. There's no like, oh, you consented once, so it's over. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work that way. you don't get forever consent, which, good luck explaining that to a jury that is of course, majority men. I wish we could jog this back to when we first started dating and just getting to know each other. Ever since I opened Pandora's box, I've never been able to close it. One night of fun turned into the entirety of our relationship. And now it's all I'm expected to do and get called for. It's hurting me because I'm so much more than being loved in the dark in hotel rooms, doing things that make me feel disgusted with myself. I'm confusing your lust for me as real love. My heart is really in this and it's breaking. I don't want to play this role in your life anymore. It's dark, sleazy, and makes me feel disgusted with myself. This is September 17th from Jane, the other the other person that came out. My heart is really in this and it's breaking. I don't want to play this role in your life anymore. It's dark, sleazy. It makes me feel disgusted with myself. I feel it's the only reason you have me around and why you pay me for the house. I don't want to feel obligated to perform these nights with you in fear of losing the roof over my head. I mean, this is literally coercion, right? I don't want to keep feeling like that anymore. I'm crying as I type this. We just need to talk like adults and figure out where we'll go from here. He says, girl, stop. Prosecutors used this September 17, 2023 exchange with a second woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane to show her increasing disinterest in hotel nights. September 24, 2023. I can't even look. It will drive me crazy. Laughed at above message, Jane laughs at. You might blow up, daddy, like a locomotive muy caliente. In its closing argument, the defense pointed to this exchange as evidence that even shortly after an episode the government identified as a time when Jane was sex trafficked, she appeared to describe video footage of a hotel night as exciting. So they made short work. They made light work of the evidence that the prosecutors had laid out by basically hitting the classic, oh no, you don't understand, she was asking for it defense. She was the third and was subpoenaed, not voluntary as far as I know. What the defense used to discredit her is that Diddy still pays her rent and paid for her attorneys. Law tip, it's a complicated case to prove from just a logistical perspective. You need really skilled prosecutors who know what they're doing. Tons of evidence means a jury could get bored or confused easily. Typically, federal prosecutors are on top of it. Looks like they dropped the ball here, and the defense capitalized. It is a shocking, it is a shocking display, especially considering that federal cases like this are like they have a 98% success rating or something. Like federal prosecution's pretty on it. Like it is the one group that is incredibly successful in terms of identifying exactly what they can get out of people, exactly what kind of charges they can bring up so they don't over prosecute and then end up losing. They also are pretty good. Usually they're notoriously very good. So I don't know how they did that. Not if you're rich. No, even if you're rich, what do you mean? The feds. I'm about to be a criminal defense attorney, and the common notion throughout the criminal defense community is when the feds got you, they really got you. Exactly. Which is why it's like a little surprising, maybe in shitification, who knows? But even the dynamic of like misogyny being weaponized for the client here by the defense is supposed to be inconsequential considering how much evidence the prosecutors are supposed to present. But yeah, Diddy's defense team was pretty goated from what I understand. And I think it was literally, I think it's also Luigi Mangioni's defense team too. Now, there is no underlying, overarching societal expectation between men and women in the Luigi Mangione one, so that's not going to work in his favor. But he was Young Thug's lawyer. The Young Thug case is even harder, in my opinion, to beat than this one. Like, given the evidence that we looked at with the Young Thug one, and also on top of that, the dynamic of a black person engaging in a criminal enterprise as a rapper, that is one where the societal attitude does not favor Young Thug. It actually works against him, as opposed to Diddy, the dynamic between female victims of sexual coercion and sexual assault. That dynamic does work in favor of Diddy, as we saw. But who knows what happens with a Lil Durk too in the future. I mean, the feds clearly are no longer as the feds clearly don't have the same motion that they once did. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, I want to go to Chloe Malas, who's standing by outside of court right now. Chloe, obviously a very emotional scene playing out in court. We don't have cameras in the courtroom. Yeah,
that's also true. The Young Thug case was a state case. Worst prosecutors. There was a ton of corruption surrounding the case that got the eventual reason for the state offering Young Thug the insane plea deal that he got. Fair. That's also true. It was super high profile in the worst possible ways. The ambitious DA also was like going after Trump. And then there was a little bit of kismet going on there as well, because like the DA was already under a tremendous amount of pressure from trying to do a racketeering charge against Trump, which I was very excited for. She should have just focused on that, you know, instead of getting her boyfriend involved in some of these cases. But it is what it is. All right. That wasn't even that, but that did work in that did certainly work in Young Thug's favor for definitely. All right, let's
but we do have a team fanned out all over that building that you're looking at right now. Bring us inside the courtroom, if you will, Chloe, about what is happening in there. What is the reaction as this is still playing out and the judge thanking the jury now?
Even though there are 2 guilty counts for the Mann Act, Laura, the transportation to engage in prostitution, this is a massive victory for Combs's 8-person defense team. Tenny Garagos, the daughter of celebrity attorney Mark Garagos, who is one of the lead attorneys for this criminal case of Combs, she's wiping tears. This is a massive moment because, like you said, sex trafficking had a mandatory 15-year minimum. I mean, the prosecutors, they painted Combs as somebody that was beating women, which they owned up to, but running a criminal enterprise, and that he sex trafficked 2 of his former girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and also Jane, who testified under a pseudonym. This is undoubtedly a massive blow to the prosecution, who brought 34 witnesses. They talked a lot about these co-conspirators that they say carried out this illegal activity on Combs's behalf. I mean, you have 6 of his children in there. His mother, Janice, who has been inside the courtroom every single day. Diddy is praying. He is doing a prayer show of his prayer hands to the jury right now. I mean, I sat there in that courtroom almost every single day, and I watched the faces of those jurors, and you could tell that there were several of them that were not buying what the prosecution was putting forth in their arguments. I saw some roll their eyes. I saw some even fall asleep, some clearly not buying what the prosecution was saying in their closing arguments. On the other hand, during Mark Agnifalo's theatrical closing arguments, there was even laughter from some of the jurors. It was a very clear, Misty Maris and I have talked about this at length, that there was dissent when it came to the racketeering. And I think that it is incredibly powerful that this jury, some were unpersuadable, that overnight they were able, within just an hour, to come to a unanimous verdict on the racketeering conspiracy. I mean, again, Combs, who does not have a lengthy criminal record, this is somebody that Mann Act, it's a 10-year mandatory maximum. It's unlikely that he would get that full 10 years. So this is a man that could see a few years behind bars. Again, this is a very emotional day. We are expecting the attorneys to give.
Yeah, I saw CNN reporting people outside the courthouse pouring baby oil on each other. We are a deeply unserious society, man. It's like, brother, even if like there wasn't enough evidence, let's say, to convict someone beyond reasonable doubt that like they did racketeering or they were basically the head honcho of a criminal enterprise that was like sex trafficking women and setting up these like sex parties and extorting women to participate in them. Okay, he's still on video like beating the out of his girlfriend. Like, he's still like a sex predator. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? Like, oh, baby oil. Like, oh, sick. I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand. Like, even in the lightest version of events, like, there's still a tremendous amount of awfulness. And then there was a judge coercing a witness to testify in his chambers without the defense being present. Insane constitutional violation of a crime. You forgot the most insane part of the YSL case. Oh, yeah, that's right. I think people just have a fundamentally poor understanding of consent. Once the jurors saw the text of the women agreeing, it's over. They don't understand coercion and manipulation. The victims are predominantly black women. This is a major factor. I think that definitely also plays a role in it as well. You got 8 men involved in it. But yeah, I've talked about this since the Me Too era, that like we just don't have well-defined boundaries in terms of like interpersonal relationships between men and women and as a consequence of that, and as also a direct consequence of like really bad education surrounding consent and surrounding how to deal, how men should treat women in general because of patriarchal constructs. There is still a shit ton of dudes that don't maybe even look back at their previous interactions and look at this kind of backlash that has taken place, and instead of recognizing that like they should change the way they carry themselves, they have basically created a backlash against this wave of women demanding justice. So that's why you see so much like celebration of this kind of thing. That's why you see all the misogyny tourists as well, where people are just like, well, I could be in that situation. I have been in a situation similar, maybe not like directly similar to Diddy, right? Obviously not. That's a unique case. But I think a lot of dudes just basically see this situation and go like, well, they're going to come after me too. They're going to come after me as well. I don't know. That's what it feels like. Can you define misogyny tourist for us? Yeah. It's something that I noticed in the Tory Lanez case, which was, especially when you look at the details without any sort of bias whatsoever, when you just like look at the details of what took place and what the criminal justice system decided to take on as an issue, given Megan Thee Stallion's like initial lack of interest in like prosecuting Tory Lanez, despite the fact that he literally shot her, like shot in her direction, shot at her, right? People, regardless of people's interest in Tory Lanez directly, because like there were a lot of people who didn't give a Tory Lanez, but they did care about like a woman that was victimized in the negative direction, right? Like people jumped on board in this case and defended Tory Lanez unconditionally because they were like, oh yeah, no, this guy's innocent. He like shot a woman. Who gives a like, this is yet again another instance where like a man is in the crosshairs. A man is under attack. Yeah, the individual were not attacked, but their perceived social caste was attacked. Yeah, it wasn't even like Megan Thee Stallion pressing charges against Tory Lanez anyway. It was the state. It was a criminal case. And I feel like this dynamic plays itself out over and over again in so many circumstances where, like, this isn't to say that there is no instance where like a man has been falsely maligned. I'm sure it happens, but the overwhelming majority of times is like men not being prosecuted for things that they've done that is prosecutable, or men getting away with doing heinous to women. That is like, it's entirely slanted in one direction. And I think the only reason why a lot of people basically unconditionally support men in every single one of these cases is because they fear that they have found themselves in this tricky space of navigating interpersonal relationships with women, and they think they have also done things similar, and possibly some have done things that are similar, right? Harmed women in this circumstance as well. So this is what it is. Chances are, if you're worried that they'll go after you, then that's probably pretty likely you did some sleazy shit. Like there is a I think an exaggeration on their end as well. Like there isn't, because they're not random dudes that are defending Diddy are not defending Diddy because they also have done racketeering and potentially extorted women to do sex trafficking over state boundaries. Okay, that is a hyper specific 1%er style crime. Okay, it is the energy involved and the battle lines that have been drawn that people see themselves on one side of this versus the other. No, it's not even aspirational. These people are not thinking about it like that. They're thinking about it as this, okay? I've been in a situation where I wanted to have sex with a girl and she said no to me, but maybe I was a little pushy and maybe I was a little rude, maybe I was a little creepy. What if I would go to jail for that similar thing? That's what they're thinking, okay? Clipped. Guys, stop. You know what I'm explaining here, okay? That is just like the mentality that drives so many of these people. It's nasty as say clip it off of this. I think that that is where a lot of people's that is where a lot of people come from. That like that's their starting point, especially considering that like I said, there is a lot of like people will say, oh dude, consent is consent. Like, yes, this is true, but there is also still like interpersonal relationships are difficult to navigate, especially for heterosexual people, especially between men and women. Okay, when you're young, even when you're older, there's a lot of social conditioning that factors into the way that people react to one another as well. It makes things much worse, right? It's already difficult to begin with, but then on top of that, you slam on the societal expectations, the societal dynamic of like how women are supposed to present themselves and how men are supposed to present themselves and how what societal expectations are and what women should and shouldn't do and how women should conceive of bad experiences that they might have gone through. Like how should they reflect on that? All of this stuff factors into the dynamic of silence that revolves around these kinds of issues. Like on the one hand, the societal expectation is that women are supposed to be quiet in these situations, right? Like they're supposed to be the ones, societal expectation is that women are supposed to be the ones that are not making the first step, right? They're the ones who are supposed to be receiving the flirtatious advances. And then women are also supposed to, women are taught to be reserved and not actually explain their demands clearly in a definitive way, because if you do that, then you're seen as a right. And this is a part of every facet of existence where women in the workplace also run into similar issues as well, right? So then on top of that, like men are also taught to chase and be pushy, and all of that is all of that factors into it. And then like there is the expectation that like women are supposed to maintain some kind of like chastity, right? So even if they have a sexual desire, they're taught not to express that sexual desire in a forward fashion, because then there's the slut shaming dynamic beyond it. So then at that point, even if someone were to consent or were to be invested in pursuing a relationship further, they're not clearly defining that they want that, and in which case that's the male on that on the other side of that is like the pursuer, and they're thinking, oh, she's just saying maybe she's being more reserved because she's worried, right? She's worried about how this looks. So then, she's just playing hard to get. Like all of this stuff exists already as a direct consequence of the well-established gender dynamics that play a formative role in every aspect of society. So then when you slam all of that together, this is the outcome. And I'm not talking about Diddy being victim to societal expectations. I'm saying why he was able to get away with doing heinous and why some men see themselves in a similar vein and will literally go out to bat and will defend these heinous perverts. And for younger boys, it's just a joke for them. It really bothers me how the takeaway from this case is that he's bad and gross because he's bisexual, not a sex trafficker. Gen Alpha and young Gen Z literally say no Diddy instead of no homo. I know. That's why I said like it's a unique predicament, because like on the one hand, I don't think anyone's gonna be like pro Diddy. Also, thank you for the 100 gifted subs, open presents. But not because of the gender wars issue, because the gender wars issue demands that young men defend. The gender wars dynamic demands that young men unconditionally defend and vociferously defend Diddy. But the fact that he's also the fact that he's gay causes people to not do that unconditionally and vociferously, if that makes sense.
At press conference, the prosecutors have said that they will be giving a written statement. They will not be speaking today. We also know that the
Fawning can also appear as compliance to prevent harm. For example, if an individual knows their attacker will harm them physically if they fight back, they may comply in order to protect themselves. This does not mean that they consented to abuse or assault. It just means that they were trying to prevent the situation from escalating. Yeah.
Family plans to address his children. They plan to address the public. And we do think that there could be a statement from Combs himself later today. But in a very emotional scene in the courtroom. And I just want to remind everyone that over the last 7 weeks, although there were 34 witnesses that took the stand, Combs' team not calling a single witness and resting their case in just 30 minutes. I want to describe the scene behind me now. You have what I like to call citizen journalists. These are live bloggers, Instagrammers, TikTokers, filming every single day, live streaming what's happening here. There is a massive crowd gathering. There's about 100 people here right now. Some people are wearing free puffy shirts. You've seen that over the last several weeks. And again, Laura, a stunning victory, if you can call it that. But it is, considering that he was facing up to life in prison for Combs and his legal team this morning.
Yeah, no question. The federal prosecutors are going to be massively disappointed with this verdict, even with those 2 guilty counts, Chloe.
I think I saw recently is a cop explaining how he has to teach coercion to young men, using them getting mugged as an example. Like, you have your wallet because he threatened to stab you. It was still against your will. And that's the only way he can get them to understand coercion sexually. It's actually kind of good. That's a decent way to explain that dynamic. You might even, in an effort to not, whether because you're a victim of shock and trauma in that moment, you might even try to like make jokes with the person who is pursuing you, right? Yeah, you might even try to like have a normal back and forth conversation. So to the onlooker, if that was like documented, they could just as easily say, well, you gave your wallet to this guy. You gave your wallet to this guy and you joked around with him. Okay, but what you don't see is that he had a gun, you know? Yeah, you might even try and use humor to de-escalate the situation. That doesn't mean that there isn't coercion in that circumstance. There's certainly coercion in that circumstance. Consent was explored by the psychological expert that the prosecution called. Defense picked apart her credibility by showing that she only testifies for the state and is highly paid. An effective cross can heavily discredit a witness like this, especially if the witness is saying stuff about consent the jury doesn't already know, like we do. Juries are normies. Exactly. And you gotta factor in the demographic profile of the jury as well. Jury selection is a massive part of this. Obviously, that's like legal teams usually have an entire legal teams have a specific group of people dedicated to doing the perfect jury selection. And I think that this is one that heavily favored, as far as I understand, the jury, as its demographic profile, the jury heavily was slanted in the direction of defense, male majority. I think in this circumstance, like even women have the capacity to exhibit misogynistic tendencies, misogynistic opinions, as we've talked about before, because that's how patriarchy works. There are plenty of women, as we saw with like the Cuomo stuff. There are plenty of women who like automatically assume that like guys do this kind of thing. It's normal, right? Not like the oil and the extortion and the sex trafficking, but like, you know, this is a rich, famous guy. This is a rich, famous guy who's paying unimaginable amounts of money to all of these women. They should be grateful. Like, you know what I mean? Like that could be the attitude of an even older lady, for example. And then that certainly is the attitude of a lot of the men in the jury. It's way, way, way more likely that the men in the jury are going to feel that way. They also brought up how much expensive stuff Diddy bought for them to say, oh, but he was giving them so much money. Exactly. From what I heard, and it's likely his defense team employed a rarely used tactic called, this is real, the Chewbacca defense, which is literally named after a South Park joke. This tactic is basically used to repeatedly ask questions that would be permissible under the rules of evidence, but are only being asked to confuse the jury and make them overthink things. That all being said, there are ways to get through the hostile jurors. It just takes skill and preparation, and the prosecutors up. I'm just shocked because it's like the feds. Not for real. Too many people have a what did you think would happen going to that party mentality. It's bogus and the collective society is fried for so many countries. Yeah, this is one of the most prescient, long-standing parts of every country, like most countries' culture war issues is like the gender war dynamic. It kind of goes away every couple of years. And because the state is woefully inept prosecuting these kinds of things, then there is like a decentralized effort to take matters into their own hands, like out of an understandable, genuine desire for justice. Women will sometimes take matters in their own hands. That's how the Me Too movement happened. And when that takes place, there's also like a pendulum swinging in the opposite direction as well. There's also opportunists like the Time's Up movement, people that literally work with Andrew Cuomo that like basically tried to use this this real genuine concern as a means of like career advancement. But then the pendulum swings in the opposite direction. There's also people who are getting articles written about them that is seen as like a career death sentence, I guess, quote unquote. And then that is and it's not over like any sort of serious violation, but instead is treated with the same severity. And then the cultural pendulum swings in the opposite direction, and then you have the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp stuff, and now we're officially in the post Me Too era, where the pendulum is officially swung in the opposite direction, and people are getting incredibly vicious, like with the Andrew Tates of the world, with the Manosphere. People are getting incredibly vicious for perceived slights, and are actively defending men across the board, unconditionally, without even like looking into it, without even addressing any of it. And it's like it's swung back into the previous standard that was in place already before the Me Too movement. Do you think they intentionally flubbed this so that any potential blackmail shit will stay hidden? No, I don't think P. Diddy's level of like sex party shit was actually being done in a similar fashion to Jeffrey Epstein. So no, I don't think that. Like I don't think P. Diddy or Andrew Tate are like Jeffrey Epstein style sex traffickers. I don't think that they're playing the same role. Like I don't think that that's what's going on. It was, mate. Okay. Like it's similar as far as like crimes being committed. It's not similar as far as like what the goals were here. Okay, you can't compare. Jeffrey Epstein is like truly a unique figure as an asset for intelligence, for numerous intelligence communities, especially Mossad and the CIA. That I believe that Jeffrey Epstein was a sexual blackmail operation and a fixer of sorts as well, but a person that was like the glue for a lot of the societal elites down to like fucking royalty. Okay. That is an entirely different standard that I don't even know if we'll ever find another version of that. No reason to think Diddy wasn't the same for Hollywood. No, I think there is what? I feel like you have a little sampling bias. Your job is mostly looking at reactionaries doing things like essay or worse apologists. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think normie discourse ain't tainted to that degree. No, I think normies have a really slanted opinion on this kind of stuff where they're just like, I don't really get it. Yeah, a rich guy was doing sex parties. It's weird. It's gross. But like these women were probably asking for it is probably the most common normie attitude on this stuff.